February 25th, 2020. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item of the agenda is approval of the minutes of January 28th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? The chair votes aye. It's 500. Next, we need to approve the minutes of February 11th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The chair votes aye. That's 500. Next item on the agenda is approval of the warrant. Are there any questions? Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Chair votes aye. That's 302. I'm getting better at counting those. Okay, is there someone who's here tonight for public participation on a topic that's not already listed on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to our information and reports. So Bridget Conceição is here as our student rep. And do you have a report for us tonight?
Yes.
Great,
So
thank you.
the entire student council right now is planning the senior citizens dance for March 29th. And right now we're just getting donations for raffles, and we're having food donated, so we're still working on that. And this week the athletic teams, the winter athletic teams, have been playing a lot, and last night the boys basketball team played and we won, and we had a huge fan section. It's crazy. And then tonight, right now, the girls are playing, the girls basketball team. And the girls hockey team also played tonight, and the boys hockey team plays tomorrow.
Bridget, you gonna make a motion that we cancel the school committee meeting and go down and watch the girls basketball?
Second.
Second? No, you can do that?
I have an update on the girls from
Oh, you do?
Mr. Brothers sent me a direct message. 5-4 in overtime, Burlington won.
Wow.
Yeah, girls hockey, yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, they hadn't been in the tournament in a few years, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
Great.
And hopefully boys wins tomorrow. Fingers crossed. And that's it.
All right. Good. Any
Wrestling update?
I know that the Sodas, one of them plays first, Zach, I think, and Cam plays second.
Excellent.
And they're going to all states this weekend.
Okay, just for future reference, for winter athletics, just start with wrestling.
Okay.
Okay, that'd be better.
Says Mr. Used to Wrestle.
Yes.
Yeah.
My parents told me that. They filled me in.
Just one question.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
question.
Mrs.
Yes.
Monaco wants some details on the senior citizens dance.
Mr. Murphy really wants them, but he doesn't want to admit it.
Any other questions or comments for our student representative, Bridget?
Can I just add,
Yes,
because
Mr.
it was a state championship,
Yeah.
no offense, I had to
No,
relook at it myself.
offended.
Cam Soda was won the championship
Okay.
in Division II at his weight class, and Zach finished, he lost 5-3 in a really close match. So just state champs don't happen a lot, so I just wanted to
Yes.
give the right brother
Good.
Yeah,
the notice there.
wow, that's great.
And again, the silence after that comment by Mr. Murphy, I think is clear evidence that this is a learning experience for you. So that was the appropriate reaction. So
Good
that was
job.
awesome.
Good job.
So thank you for all that you're doing.
No
And
problem.
again, the senior dance is a great experience.
Yes.
So appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, and thank all of the other student council members who are doing these things. Thanks. Mhm.
See you, Bridge.
All right. So next we have, do we have any subcommittee reports? Mr. Murphy? Mhm.
Just from the rec commission, they keep inquiring about the fields situation, so I explained that it's probably on tonight's meeting, and we'll
Yep.
talk about it then, so.
Okay.
They're just waiting for feedback on that.
Okay. I think that's something we should wait
Yeah.
to talk about. Okay? Any other committee meeting reports? Okay. Does Ways and Means have anything tonight before later? Okay. And any other announcements? We got a lot of the sports announcements. Did we get all of our winners out today? I keep getting notices on my email about, or maybe it's Twitter, but about all the teams winning a lot of really exciting competitions this year. So congratulations to all of our students, and I hope they all had fun, even if they didn't win, too. So.
Just the boys basketball, Patrick is playing Friday night again here, is that?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure.
So
I just know they beat
think they're
Woburn last
playing
night.
it
Friday
Friday?
here against Winchester.
Winchester,
Yes.
so if people are interested in attending, that's the next step.
The boys hockey is tomorrow night down in Framingham in the Super 8 against BC High, and that's, I believe it's a 7 o'clock time.
So,
All
and then we'll post the other upcoming games too, because again, hopefully girls basketball will win, they'll still be in it, and then girls hockey is still in it. So that's there. Madam Chair, the other
Yes.
announcement is we have the Burlington Education Foundation Trivia Night is upcoming on Friday, March 6th, the evening of Friday, March 6th. That's a great event, so we will, you all have participated in the past, so we will, again, post that announcement. We can get that up on Facebook, but if people like to participate, the Burlington Education Foundation is a group that provides grants directly to our teachers and principals in schools for innovative projects. And they've just been tremendously supportive throughout the years. And just want to thank the BEF for all their efforts. And
Yes.
they usually come to us in the spring and explain all they've done. They'll do that again. But the Trivia Night is one of their big fundraisers. So if you have an opportunity, it's a fun night. And again, that's Friday evening on March 6th.
Yeah. I also was reminded that our drama club, the high school drama club, is doing Antigone this coming Friday night at 7:30. We just, this past year, changed, they always did their plays in the fall, but drama clubs seem to do their competitions in the spring. So the drama performance this year is this coming Friday, Antigone, and I understand they're going on Saturday then to the competition. So I wish them good luck, and I'm hoping to make it Friday night. So, other announcements?
Just
Mr.
one other quick
Wilson?
one on the boys track team. Either one or two of the members of the boys track team qualified for the New Englands, and they're going to be held this year at the Reggie Lewis Center this weekend. I believe one of them was a high jumper, and we wish them well, and hopefully they'll win more accolades for the town, and congratulations to them.
Good. Any other announcements? We got lots going on here, so that's great. Okay, so the next item is the elementary space needs discussion, and probably I'd like to ask Mr. Cuna to give us a report, because yesterday was a deadline for the RFQs. So please let us know what's up.
So, thank you. As the chair mentioned, the RFQ was due yesterday at 11 o'clock in the morning. We did receive 6 submissions. One company actually thought that the delivery company didn't make the delivery, so they actually drove one out here, so we have 2 from the same company. That's how determined they were to get here.
Oh, okay.
But we have used some of the companies in the past, so I'm familiar with a few of them. I'm still reviewing. I have digital copies and I have printed copies for everybody on the board, so I will pass those out to you all, and I'll make some recommendations as well. So I can get those out to you digitally tonight if you'd like, and I can give you the paper copies tonight as well, after the meeting.
Great. Is there some kind of timetable of when we are looking to make decisions about which one to hire and such?
If we would like to use them in helping us with the statement of interest for the MSBA project, then obviously we would like to have that done before April 6th, which is the deadline for that submission. Now, we can obviously fill out that, and if we were to contract with somebody from that group later on in the process and have them review it later on, that's okay as well. But April 6th is the deadline for the statement of interest.
So Dr. Conti, it seems like if we want to use the new firm, which we haven't picked yet, to help us make a submission on April 6th, we would need to decide before April 6th who that was so that they could do that. What I'm hearing you say, Mr. Cuna, is that we could make the submission even without the input from the new firm and then continue to revise it as things go along. Is that accurate or no?
Close. So I would like to take as much time as possible up until the April 6th deadline before the actual submission of the form. But we can go online and work on the form and save it as is, as much and as frequently as we would like to. So there's no deadline on that until the April 6th timeframe. So I could go in, Dr. Conti could go in, and you can go in and make any changes and submissions to the new request. But until we officially hit submit on April 6th, that would be our last deadline.
Okay.
So do we need the firm to do all the work is, I think a lot of the submission is just factual information that we can transfer from a prior submission. So I think we can probably get most of that done. I think where they would potentially help is narrative, and more than likely Bob and I would write the narrative, and all we would need them to do is review it and make some suggestions for us. So, I would say you probably have a month to review if you need to. With 6 firms, there's, my opinion, not that many. I don't think it, look at the submissions. If you think it's going to take a while, we would just need to set up an opportunity. If you want to winnow down the 6 after reviewing the paperwork, then we would extend an opportunity for the remaining folks to come in and present to you if that's what you wanted. So again, I think we should be able to get that done in a relatively short period of time. But we don't need them to complete our submission, and we're not waiting on them to begin that work.
Okay, are there other questions? Oh, go ahead.
No, and the only other part to this as well is, and Bob, help me out here, if we're choosing the one firm that's also a design firm but also is doing engineering, we have a warrant that was approved last May for the design of bid documents
HVAC boiler bid documents, yes.
for the high school. So that's work that is already supported by a warrant that we would, if you make the selection of this firm, and they're going to be doing that work, then you would want to have that in mind when you make the selection, because then at that point they would be moving forward. That isn't work to replace the boilers, that's work to then put that out to bid so we could get firms to give us a price in the work. But then we'd have to go to town meeting to support the work to replace that system, and that's going to be very expensive. So I think that's going to be in the tens of millions range. So. So I think that's another aspect of this, in addition just to the elementary submission for the statement of interest.
Right. I was actually going to suggest, and I don't know what the right wording is, that we've been having this on the agenda ongoing, the elementary space needs, but maybe it should be our building projects needs, because we really are almost needing to prioritize the high school over the we need to continue to work on the elementary building issue, but we need to be moving on the high school renovation questions. So maybe we can have that, we keep talking about both of them, but we should call it what it is, I think. So I think that's important.
We can amend the agenda.
Yeah, for the future is fine, yeah. So any other comments or questions about the applicants or the submissions for the RFQ that people have, or yes,
Yeah.
Bob?
I just want to state one other thing just for the board here, is that we're not limited to only picking one. We have the option that we can choose only one, but we also have the option in the bid documents that we could choose multiple if we saw that was a benefit to Burlington.
Okay,
So.
okay, Mrs. Russo?
And follow up to that, so what would be a benefit to have multiple, like more eyes on the project, or one's engineering and one's different aspect?
So it depends on once the board has reviewed all of their documents. I think what I've seen so far, there's a lot of expertise in these submissions. And if we were stuck saying, I would vote this one and this one, we could take both of them. we could have them work on different projects. I don't know that simultaneously would be something that I would shoot for, but like I said, if we had multiple projects going on at the same exact time, we could look at it that way.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? No? Okay, I would like it if we could get that information, and, you know, if we do decide we want their input before April 6th, that's 5 weeks from now, so we would, you know, want to try to make a decision sooner than later if we wanted to get any of their input. It sounds like we don't need to get their input to do the SOI, but if we find that there's a firm that we're really impressed with that we think might be helpful, then we could use them if we do this and, you know, keep the speed going, so, okay? All right, next we have a communication on a skills capital grant. And I don't know what that refers to, so I'm not sure who was
Dennis,
going
come on
to
up
speak to it.
since
Okay.
you so ably represented the community and the district today, so thank you for doing that. Dennis attended an event in Gloucester with the governor, and so the Baker Polito administration, they just awarded $14.5 million to schools for a skills capital grant, and Dennis can talk to you about the Burlington submission. We were awarded, I think, a significant grant along with one of our neighbors, and it's something that we're really excited about and proud of Dennis and Shireen and his team for writing the grant. So, Dennis.
Thank you.
Can we just do last names too for people
Yeah.
who aren't familiar with you?
I'm Dennis Villano. I'm the Director of Technology Integration for
Thank
Burlington Public Schools. My role is technology integration, educational instruction, and library media in the district. So this grant was from a round of grants for this year from the Baker and Polito administration. Skills capital grants are meant to provide funds for equipment purchasing and technology purchasing to put things in hands for students that will go directly into the workforce skill building. So these are opportunities. There's a lot of schools like Shawsheen, I think was one of the other ones today that was awarded a grant for this. They're purchasing a lot of materials for labs, technology, computer science, and information technology. For our grant, we're working with the high school under the Future Innovative Pathways. So our students are working towards computer science and information technology careers and career readiness. So this grant for $225,000 will provide equipment for those pathways, for the students in those pathways. And that could be computer science classes, that could be robotics, augmented and virtual reality. They'll most likely be involved in programming, coding, and even some work. We have some work with some drones that we're going to expand that as well at the high school. So the grant, this round provides purchasing for that. And we're working in tandem, as Dr. Conti said, with Shireen Terrell in the computer science department at the high school. They're going to be working on another grant that we got earlier that you all have heard of, which was for the Innovative Pathways, to provide some training for teachers to work with these resources and these new technology items that we're going to bring into the school. And this grant is something that I think we'll have to talk about the process. It's a grant that we have to purchase everything by the end of this June.
So besides thanking everybody and just because she's often here and sitting in the back, Diana is Ms. Marcus, Diana Marcus, who is our president of the BEA, but she's also a computer science teacher at the middle school. We're also looking to expand some of this equipment to the middle school to fill the funnel. So I'm thinking she's been part of these conversations as well, so I wanted to make sure I recognized her. So Diana, thank you for that. And the official act, I'd like the school committee to vote to accept the grant. It's a significant amount of money. Again, it's about $227,700. So $225,000. And then I think if you vote to accept it, then that would we can set up all the accounts and get the money spent.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, Madam Chair, that the committee accept the grant of $225,700.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Thank you to everyone who made that happen. It doesn't just show up on one's doorstep. I know, Dr. Conti, you've had somebody say, let's go get this money. I'm guessing you and Shireen had something to do with it, and thank you, the actual application. And now it's going to be a lot of work to figure out what we should use it for and what should be purchased, and to go ahead and do that. And then to get the teachers involved and then trained and such. It's a big project, but it's really wonderful to have this large grant to support the work that you and all the teachers are doing in the schools. So thank you for all of that. Mrs. Monaco?
Dennis, this is awesome. This is just awesome. I'm like beyond excited for the idea that we'll have more technology money, and the kids that are doing robotics will, be able to spread their wings, get things off the ground. That is just a fabulous, fabulous grant, and I couldn't be happier with it.
Great.
So thank you for all of your efforts.
Thank you.
Mrs. Russo?
I sort of have a question. So
Okay.
will this be, in the program of studies, we'll see a robotics class or a drone class, or can this be both after-school programs, clubs, and?
I think it can definitely be both. Some of the equipment will go directly into courses that are already in the course catalog. The Future Innovative Pathways I think we began having students start that process this year. So these courses will be courses they'll be choosing along that pathway, which ultimately ends in the mentor program and the internship for seniors. So these devices, these robotics that we're going to be bringing in, the AR and VR, which is something that we have not done a lot of yet. We're hoping to do more AR, which is augmented reality. Leroy Wong at the high school, who runs the student help desk courses, has already done some of that, but these resources will really help him expand that program. So we hope, I do hope that we'll see some new courses come from this. There isn't a specific drone course right now. There isn't a specific augmented reality course right now. But I think Dr. Conti could attest that we're hearing a lot from local businesses, even in this area and beyond, that need students that have been trained and prepared in those areas. So although they're parts of courses right now, they're not a fully dedicated course. I think we could see that happen over the next couple of years as the demand goes up. The great news is the demand for these courses from our students is rising very quickly. We just need to make sure that we're able to sustain it down year after year. We need to make sure we bring more staff on board that are trained to teach these courses. And I think that we also, as part of that Future Innovative Pathways program, we need to make sure that we get more females involved in it, because those numbers are still relatively low. I think we've all talked about that when we talked about the Innovative Pathways program. The goal is to bring more female students along. Ms. Marcus can attest that she's got a very good amount of those students interested at the middle school level, but we often see that number just completely disappear once they get to the high school level. It's not a Burlington issue. This is a worldwide issue, but we hope that these resources that we'll bring in with a grant like this can help expand those numbers.
Excellent. Thank you again. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
Just briefly, Dennis, I want to thank you, echo the thanks of my fellow committee members. Dennis is kind of an unsung, behind-the-scenes guy that is very effective at what he does, and he does a great job for the town, so I appreciate it. From a personal standpoint, I guess my question is, will this mean that I get a new Etch-a-Sketch?
Yes. It will, and we'll deliver it with a robot this time.
Thank
It
you.
won't be Bob and I. It'll be Mr.
Looking forward to
Kuna
it.
and I.
Okay, Mr. Nelson?
Just one quick comment. Congratulations, Dennis. We've been on the committee a long time, and this is one of the biggest grants I can recall the town receiving. I mean, it's massive. And thank you for all your hard work and making it a reality. And it's going to really benefit the students, and it's going to help us continue to grow and get the students ready for the next century. Thank you.
We're very excited about it. Thank you again to Shireen Terrell. Thank you to Katie Whitcomb from the math department, who really has computer science teachers at the high school. They all had some input, and we'll all work together, as you said, on the items that we'll be purchasing over this year.
And just because it can get confusing, Madam Chair, this grant is in addition to the Innovative Pathways grant, which was the $50,000 grant that we had discussed before. Burlington High School is one of 14 high schools, I think, that was awarded that grant this year. So this skills grant will actually help support the other Innovative Pathways grant that we have going on. So this would be, again, it's in addition to that. And then we have a couple other events that we're trying to.
Okay, we have a motion on the table.
Motion, yes.
So, is there any other comments or questions? We had it seconded already, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? The chair votes aye. That's 500. Thank you very much to everyone. And I think there's more to be said
No,
about these
just,
issues.
it's just exciting stuff. So,
Yes.
just a couple of upcoming events that I think we've mentioned, but I think are worth mentioning again. On April 3rd, we're having a Middlesex League Drone Day at the Northeastern campus in Burlington. And so Northeastern has constructed an indoor-outdoor drone facility where they do a lot of testing of military drones and equipment. And they're opening that facility up to our kids, and we're bringing a bunch of students out so they can fly drones. We're also going to hear from some people who make their living flying drones and using drones. So I think that's going to be an exciting day. And then I'll mention something else. We have something with Millipore Sigma coming up later, but that would be the drone day. And then also on March 9th, we have a group of high school art teachers because some of the virtual reality, augmented reality tools that Dennis is speaking of are actually used in design, engineering, and art. And students can place themselves actually inside of art. And we have one senior, I actually should bring that presentation to the school committee, where he creates a landscape using augmented reality, and it's pretty neat to see. And they're meeting with Boston Architectural College on March 9th, and we're hopefully going to be setting up, we will be setting up 2 dual enrollment courses in design and the Intro to Architecture courses that are in the program studies. And we'll be doing more work with those schools. So we're going to be partnering with Boston Architectural College, Burlington, and we're also working with a team from the Norton Public Schools and from Buckingham, Brown and Nichols. So it's sort of a public-private college course that we're going to do that. So all this equipment will be put to good use. I think our kids are using them. I just want to make sure that this isn't just for, it's not just a math and science tool. It's being applied through all subjects, art, music, design, science, health, social studies. So it's going to be a skill that all of our graduates are going to need to have. And that's why it's important that all students have exposure and develop that interest. So I think it's important stuff. And then to Ways and Means, we always, I sometimes think people, the impression can be that we take advantage of sort of who we are, and I just want to make sure that we are always seeking grants. We don't always get them awarded because of who we are in terms of the percentage of our student population and our community's standing, but I think we are chasing grants whenever we can, and doesn't certainly limit our need in other areas, but we are seeking as much outside funding as we can. So this is evidence of that. Dennis, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the next item is the athletic field maintenance update. And I'm not sure who's going to introduce it. Mr. Murphy from the Rec, our liaison with the Rec Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just by way of background, to refresh everybody's memory, about a year and a half ago, the Recreation Department went to a new field maintenance program with a company called Tom Irwin. And it involved enhanced aeration, top dressing, things of that nature, over and above what has traditionally been done, but it also involved them moving away from their all organic treatments for between weed killers and fertilizer and things of that nature. And they introduced some non-organic chemical based weed killers in particular. And they did it in response to kind of an ongoing sense amongst people who use the athletic fields that they haven't been very well maintained over the years. The town went to all organic probably 10 years ago or so, and they just haven't got the results that they hope to get. And I think a lot of it was just due to the maintenance work, or the lack of maintenance work that was being done. So they brought in Tom Irwin. They started it at the Wildwood School fields and the Simons Park fields last spring, and had very good results. If anybody has kids who are involved in sports at either of those two places, I think you could see very easily that there's been a great improvement in the quality of the playing surface. So this year, they wanted to expand it to Raharnes, and I think Regan, a couple of other parks that are used for youth sports. And they also wanted to expand it to the school playing fields, which would include Francis Wyman School, and then we also have a soccer field behind Memorial School, and we have some playing fields down on the lower field at the middle school. The fields at the middle school and behind Simons aren't irrigated, so they really wouldn't be a candidate for this treatment, but the one at the Francis Wyman does have irrigation out there. So they brought this to us earlier this year, or late last year, I guess, in the fall. And we have an ongoing policy that we've had in place for quite a while of just organic treatment to any school playing fields. So for us to agree to this, based on the same treatment that they're doing at the other fields under the rec control, would involve us either changing or temporarily waiving our non-organic policy. So I've had some discussions, and Kristen has been involved, Steve has been involved. We've met with Brendan Egan from the rec department. We've met with the Tom Irwin representative that the town works with, Brian, and I forget what his last name is.
Anyway,
Whatever. And it's been kind of an ongoing point of discussion from our end that we've been doing some studying on and talking about. The one thing after the most recent meeting that Kristen and I had, and Bob attended with Brendan and Brian, was the question of cost, because they would be looking for the school department to contribute to the cost. The Tom Irwin program, in buying into it, has increased the maintenance costs at the rec department because of the treatment and the materials that they put down in the fields. So I met with Brendan, and after talking with Kristen and Bob subsequent to that meeting, I met with him again just to kind of clarify exactly what he's talking about in terms of contributions. And basically, according to his numbers, the additional cost for materials and the treatments at the Francis Wyman School for this coming fiscal year would be about $30,000. And his request or his proposal is that the school department agree to contribute $15,000 of that expense, and the rec would have the other 15 built into their maintenance program or maintenance budget. I talked with him briefly about the difference between staying non-organic, and we had this discussion with Brian as well. The cost is a little, that number I gave you is for staying all organic here within the school department. Save a little bit of money if we went with a hybrid, because the organic materials are more expensive. The delta wasn't all that significant, and I know that there was a pretty strong feeling amongst some of the school committee members that we keep it organic here at the on the school department field. So I asked them for the numbers on an all organic treatment. So basically, it would be about a $15,000 contribution that we would build into our budget under maintenance, and that would be contributed to these expenses. So basically, it's kind of a two-part decision that we have to make. First is, do we want to do that? Do we want to participate in this new maintenance program at a cost of $15,000? And if so, do we want to go keep it as an organic treatment, or do we want to have a hybrid type of a treatment? If we keep it organic at 15, if we go a hybrid, we might save a couple $1,000 over the course of the year. Another option that he threw out there is that we could stay organic, but when we started, and he related the experience they had at the Wildwood School, the first treatment that includes some non-organic material for weed killer was very effective, and then they didn't have to do any reapplications after it, because once you get ahead of it, then you can stay ahead of it with the maintenance program that they have. So an option, I guess, would be if we agree that we want to participate in this program, do we want to waive the non-organic rule to allow for one installation of a chemical weed killer? That treatment would happen after the school's out in June, so the kids wouldn't be in school at the time. We'd probably have to close the fields for a day or two. And then stay all organic after that. So that's kind of the second part of the discussion. The first part is if we want to participate in this program at all. If we don't, the school fields would continue to get the same treatment or the same maintenance that they always have. And that involves some fertilization and some weed killer and some aeration and top dressing and stuff like that, but not to the extent that the Irwin program provides. And I would suggest that the results will continue to be what they have been, which is the grass is green, but it's not as healthy a playing surface as it is when it's that we get from the Tom Rowan ones in the other parks. So that's basically kind of where we've been at. It's been a while since we talked about it. I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory. And so I think the threshold question from our standpoint is whether we want to participate in that program, and if so, then we can talk about what to put on it. And so that's,
Okay.
in a nutshell,
Yeah.
where we're at.
That's very helpful. Thank you for that review. I'd like to first ask if people have questions about the sort of facts of it, and then talk about what people want to do. I particularly have a question, for example, are we just talking then about the Francis Wyman athletic field because the other ones don't have the irrigation?
The other ones don't have the irrigation, so we said it wouldn't make sense to do this program.
Right, so that's what we're talking about. So that was my particular question. Does anyone else have a question about sort of what we're talking about now? Okay. So, yes, Mrs. Russo, or do you want to add?
I don't know if this is a question for now or later, but if we were to approve the 15,000, do we know where that might come from? Where we're already, so I guess that has some bearing in my thought process moving forward too.
So, right now, in the budget draft that you have, this was not accounted for, so there's no funds sort of additional earmarked for that at this point.
Okay,
So maintenance is level funded.
okay.
So I guess the answer to that question, right now, we have before us a proposed budget that's obviously in excess of what the guidelines allow, and we have to whittle it down to get into guidelines if that's the will of the committee. So that would be another item that we would have to fit into that bucket, if that's something we want to do.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Russo. Yeah.
Revolving, do we have we have some sort of revolving account that's maintenance, no, building rental. Is that an area that, but I don't like to put an operating year after year expense out of that. I'm just trying to throw everything out there.
So,
Yes, Mrs. Kasha? Ms. Kasha?
so, yes, we have our building rental, and it can be used to maintain buildings, fields, what have you, so that it would be an appropriate expense if we choose to go that route.
Yes.
Probably a one-year bridge.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. All right. Yes, Mrs. Monaco?
Does it make sense that if we need the money before July 1st, we could take it out of that revolving account and then budget for the following year?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to put my position out there. I am opposed to using any synthetics on the field. I am only in favor of using organic material. I feel that contributing to it is probably a good idea, because I think what happened before with the organic program is that it would have worked, but it wasn't sufficiently funded, and so that we didn't have the maintenance people to do the work, and we didn't have the recreation maintenance. We didn't have people to do the work, and we didn't have the supplies. Their budget was limited, so they were ordering smaller amounts than they needed. And in order to do these fields and have them come out well and stay looking good and safe for playing fields, they need to be properly funded, and there needs to be enough manpower to work on the fields. So I hope, Tom, if we decide to go with the 15,000 all organic, which is where I would go, I hope you will, at the rec meetings, make sure that this time it's funded well enough through the rec department, and that there's enough manpower to actually make it work.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
The question, or the answer is yes, but for people out there who might not understand it from the background standpoint, the way this has typically worked over the years, even though fields are on our property, the Recreation Department is in charge of managing those fields and maintaining those fields. So typically, those types of maintenance expenses don't appear in our budget. They're part of the Rec Maintenance Department budget. So this would be a little bit of a change in that we would be contributing to the work that they have traditionally been responsible for doing. And the reason that they're asking for it is this new program is over and above what they have been doing recently, and it's a town-wide, it's a significant enough added expense that they're going to have a hard time getting it all into their budget. So I think they're looking for a little assistance. But to Mrs. Monaco's concern, I agree with her, and obviously we'll keep an eye on that. I can say that just in the last roughly year or so that they've been using this, and like I said, I've been out there to look at the fields, the improvement is noticeable. So they clearly have got the hang of it. They're handling it properly. It's gotten the right amount of work. The rec department's goal is, going forward, they're going to try to move as much of the maintenance work in-house as they can, and that's going to take a few years to to work into it. So it's possible that some of this added expense will be reduced over the years, as the initial treatment is a lot more expensive, I'm told, than the ongoing treatment. Once you get a handle on it, it's easy to maintain. And then again, when they start bringing a lot of the work in-house, right now they have to sub some of that work out to some of Tom Irwin's subcontractors. That will also reduce the cost. So the hope is that this 15,000 won't necessarily be a recurring number. I mean, it might be, I guess, but the hope is that going forward, the annual expense would be less than that. And I'm confident, like I said, from what I've seen of the results so far, I'm confident that it'll work. Like I said, the one thing that the one point that they kind of stressed to me was that if we go all organic, which is fine, but he says it takes a little bit longer to get a handle and get ahead of the weeds with just the organic weed killer. He says they'll get there, but it might lengthen the process a little bit, which is why he suggested that we possibly consider a one-time exclusion of our all organic policy for just a one-time use of the synthetic weed killer. And then going forward, we can just do all organic from there, so.
Okay, Mr. Nelson?
Just a couple of comments, Madam Chairman. I think that we have an obligation to maintain our fields. I think that when we first did the Wildwood School project, we didn't do it, the town did it, the Recreation Department did it when we turned over that property. I was very disappointed to see that the weeds had taken over the field almost entirely within a season. I mean, it was very disappointing. And I go up there frequently. And apparently, when the rec department started using the Tom Irwin Company, they did this one-time application, and that's all they needed. They were planning on doing two, one in June, I think, and one in September. And they did one application of the synthetic, and it was extremely effective, and it enabled them to maintain the fields organically after that without a great deal of expense. When Tom and I first met as a subcommittee with the Tom Irwin representative, I think we both came away from that meeting thinking it was going to be extremely expensive to go all organic, because the representative gave us the impression that the organic weed killer takes a long time to work. And he also gave us the impression that the synthetic was relatively safe, that it absorbed into the grass and the ground very, very quickly within 24 or 48 hours, and it didn't pose a risk. But I understand the concern of other school committee members that we should try to stay organic 100% of the time. So I would encourage the committee to, on a trial basis, try the organic and see if it works. If it doesn't work, maybe next year we talk about a waiver of our policy and try the one-time application of the synthetic material. But it's a safety factor also, as the representative pointed out to us. When you have fields that are well-nourished and they're thick and they're plush, you don't have the injuries that you have normally. And if you've been up to Francis Wyman, I'm out there a lot because I do a lot of walking around that field. The fields are used all the time. They're used for soccer, they're used for baseball, they're used for gym classes, and they really need to be maintained effectively. And so I would be in favor of trying the organic this year and funding the $15,000. Maybe we take half of it out of buildings and rentals, or maybe we find a way to put $7,500 into our budget and get the program started and see how it works out. If the organic application is successful, then we don't have to worry about having a discussion about the synthetic application. So I know that we get the monthly reports on revolving accounts. I know Buildings and Grounds budget is pressed because we have to use that money for summer help and for getting the schools ready for September. But I think that somewhere we could find maybe $7,500 out of revolving and maybe put a little bit into our operating budget and get the fields up to speed where they belong. If you go to other communities, you'll see that most of them have fields that are very well maintained, and I think that not only is it visually attractive, it's a safety issue for the students. So that would be my 2 cents, Madam Chairman.
Mr. Cunha, is that all right?
Oh,
Yes, Susan?
I just wanted to comment one thing. So it's only the one field at Francis Wyman. This does not include Memorial and Marshall Simons. So Francis Wyman is approximately 4 acres of grass area that they'd be treating. Marshall Simons is approximately 5 acres, and Memorial is approximately 3. So there'd still be 8 acres of untreated grass area or play fields. So that means those would continue, and then we may have to have an additional conversation next year to look for additional funds then. So I don't know if that's something the board would want to consider, or even if the rec department would consider if we were to potentially come up with extra money to look at additional field coverage, or if we're just looking to handle just the Francis Wyman field in this conversation.
Any follow-up question?
Okay, Mr. Murphy, could you clarify
Yeah,
that? Because
just,
it's my understanding that the other fields are not available for this type of treatment because of the irrigation not being
The Tom
available.
Irwin Company recommends doing this only to a field with irrigation, so unless or until we irrigate either Marshall Simons or the backfields backfields of Marshall Simons or behind Memorial, I don't think they would say it's worth the effort. And they're obviously not doing it on non-irrigated town playing fields either. This is only being done on fields that has irrigation.
Follow-up question?
Does that respond your question?
Again, it is true that we don't have the irrigation in the other buildings. but then also we wouldn't have the treatment to those fields as well.
Right.
Or a different type of treatment to those as well. They would continue to grow at the rate that we currently have them in.
Exactly. They would continue to be maintained the same way they have been, which
Correct.
is, they do the best they can, but it's not as effective as the Tom Irwin. The same, the same is the case with the fields that the rec maintains for the town that don't have irrigation. You know, they can't make the improvements on those.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yes, Mr. Nelson.
I thought I was behind the memorial one day and I saw irrigation there, man. There's no irrigation at Memorial, Bob? I thought we had irrigation there.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay, I thought we
Right.
did.
Okay, maybe it was raining. Yes, Mrs. Russo.
So having gone back and forth with this over a number of months, I would be in favor of having this program started. I'm not sure if we'll see the results that you're looking for in a year, so I'm not sure if 1 year gives this program enough time to say whether or not we should do one treatment of that, especially with the organic. The difference between the organic and the hybrid is not great enough to make me feel that we would be able to use that money towards another field or help out one of the non-organic fields. Currently, I don't just harass this board about pesticides, but there are 3 bills before the House and Senate right now. One's an act relative to improving pesticide protections for Massachusetts school children. There's another one banning glyphosate and phosphate. And then there's another one to give more control to local communities so they can enact protections from pesticides within their community for the treatment of fields. So I feel like the state is, Representative Gordon is supporting these 3 bills. So I feel like the state's moving towards organics, away from pesticides when we're talking about our children and where they are frequently. So I would be only in favor of the organic, voting for that. I'm a little concerned because our other fields do need more care to them. They are deteriorating. The care that's being given to them is very minimal. So I'm just afraid of the slippery slope. We get this going, the next thing we have, you know, whatever program it is, not specifically this program that we're talking about, but Marshall, Simons, Memorial, those fields at some point are going to need more care than they have been given. So I'm nervous that we're going to start building our budget, you know, 15,000 one year, 15,000 next year, and we're looking at a much larger number than we had in the past. So I think the discussions with the rec department are crucial, that they continue moving forward for the treatment of the fields and potential funding for that. So even though I'd be in favor of this, I don't want it to be viewed as we're going to continue to add money in for our fields moving forward, if that's clear. Maybe not at a 50-50 split.
Okay, yes, Mr.
I actually agree with that, and I think I would make it clear to them that this is an annual discussion potentially.
Yeah.
You know, if it stays in the same neighborhood of what we're talking now and we can see the results, I think we'll probably be happy with that and we're happy to continue. But if they start to try to slide more things in our direction, or it doesn't seem to be working, whatever, clearly I think it's something that this committee would have to revisit each year at this time to decide whether we want to continue on or not. And so it's certainly not going to be a lifetime contract. I think it's something we kind of keep an eye on.
I was also wondering, I mean, another question I have is, what is the condition of the fields? Because we're talking about the health and safety of our children. And if the fields aren't safe and doing, I keep going back and forth. You know, if we did a hybrid and it made the difference as quickly as it did at Wildwood in one shot, and that makes the fields more even, so they don't have the gaps you get when the weeds die. We won't have as many kids injuring themselves on the fields. And I think that's an important safety and health issue, as well as that I don't want our kids exposed to chemicals that we don't need to. I actually, this week, read up, I talked to Susan Luminello at the Board of Health to try to understand how to read the charts that we got sent by the Tom Irwin people, because we got those a couple of months ago, and I was like, what do I look at? So, I mean, what I feel is that when I read through the descriptions and the labels, there are concerns. The vast majority of the concerns are for the workers who are applying and the time period when these chemicals are being, and I'll use the word chemicals generically because they could be organic chemicals and they could be synthetic, but it's to the workers who are applying these. So it is important. The rec department does have to do it well and do it right so that their employees are safe and that kind of thing. So. But in terms of children, if it's done after school is out, if it's done and we don't let kids play on the fields for 2 or 3 days or whatever the numbers should be, the health concerns for the children did not look to me, and I'm not as expert on this, but it didn't look like it was the end-all be-all of how we protect our children from chemicals. It did have some concern, a couple of the products that we had gotten names for. There was some issues around environmental hazards, where there were 1 or 2 of them where there was a concern for aquatic environments. Francis Wyman, as far as I know, and we could find this out, is not a field that's in a wet area. It's not gonna, it's my understanding, it's not gonna leach deep, deep enough to get into any water tables around there. So then I leaned toward, I'd really like to, even though it's not, originally I was thinking, well, maybe the hybrid would be less expensive, but for me it's not so much that, but maybe we should do the hybrid so we can get the fields more even and safer, and do it one time and not have it be an annual, have it be something we decide to try once. And as you said, if we don't do it this year and wait and see, it's not clear how long it would take. I also am concerned about, we thought that the fields were being taken care of organically, and they weren't they were maybe only using organic materials, but they weren't using them in the appropriate levels. The amount of work you need to do healthy organic fields is much, much bigger. And just the things I've learned are, you have to mow more often, you have to aerate more than once, you have to top seed and do those other things. So, there is extra work which costs, and that's a specific question. I don't know, Mr. Murphy, if you know the answer. Is part of the extra cost that they have to do additional staff hours, or was it just the 15,000 for, or half of that for, for the materials? Do you know?
It's for the materials and it's for labor.
Okay.
Not so much at this stage of the game for increased labor with the Burlington staff as they bring in subcontractors to do the installation. Because as you said, there's a process to it that you have to follow. And that part of it, the hope is that over the next couple of years, we can bring most of that in-house as they train the current employees in how to do it. So that's where they foresee perhaps a savings going forward. Just a couple things if I could on
Mr. Murphy?
on the rec department, both the administration and the rec commission reviewed all of this a couple of years ago when they decided to go with the Tom Irwin program. And they looked at a lot of the same reports, I think, that were sent to us, and they came to the conclusion that the application that Tom Irwin was recommending was safe as long as it was done properly and under the correct conditions. So that's why they started the program to begin with. I don't want people to think it was done irresponsibly on behalf of by the Recreation Department. But that obviously is a matter of opinion. It's a subjective test, and I can certainly understand people who are not comfortable with it. And I don't want to suggest that our fields have not been properly maintained by the Recreation Department over the years. They've been maintained to the degree that they can with the staff that they have, and in view of maybe what norms were in the past. As long as the grass was green and you didn't care if it was crabgrass or whatever, then cut it every now and then and you're happy. If you want better results, it takes more work, which is added cost, which is kind of where they are now, and they're trying to ramp it up. So it's going to be an ongoing process. I do want to remind the board that we have a policy not permitting or only allowing organic treatments, and to change a policy requires 4 votes.
Okay, can I just interject? Because I have not been able to find that policy, so I'm not sure that's accurate.
Okay.
And I apologize for not mentioning it to you earlier. I didn't know that was
My
going to come up.
understanding was that we had adopted that policy, but if
Right, and we've
if I'm
talked
incorrect, I
about it
stand
that way.
corrected.
And Mrs. Gilbert, have you been, we looked, didn't we? And so we don't think there is a policy on record.
Okay.
So that, I didn't know that issue was going to come up.
Well, I only
So-
suggested, I only brought it up because if it was a policy, it would take 4 votes to change it. And my sense is that at least 2 of the members feel strongly about keeping it organic, so that's why I kind of was focusing on that.
Yeah, Mrs. Monica.
Okay, so just from listening to all of this, I have a couple of things I want to say. One is irrigation is a one-time cost and it's cheap. We should look at irrigating those fields that are not irrigated, because all of our fields need to be in good shape. The other point I'd like to make is that the risk of using synthetics doesn't go away as quickly as you might hope. It lingers in the soil, and even though, the chemical companies and the warning labels and all of that tell you that it's safe after 3 days, 5 days, or whatever, in my opinion, it's there, and the workers are subjected to it, the kids are subjected to it, the dogs that run on it are subjected to it, and so it's not something that I'm willing to do. And the last thing, what was it? I did have another point.
Can we
I'll think
come
of
back
it.
to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Russo.
So there has been the research that shows that soil does hold on to chemicals, that it does come back through the dew. It does not dissipate as quickly as it says. You can't expect every little bit to just dissipate. It's the long-term effects. Our children are breathing faster, they're taking in the air, they're closer to the ground, their water bottles are on the ground. It's the precautionary principle that so many other countries use when they're talking about chemicals and pesticides. And as a school committee member, that is, the precautionary principle is something that I feel very strongly about going forth, no matter what we are using. You brought up the water level. September 30th, they had closed 3 wells, take them offline because of 1,4 dioxin levels were high
Right.
in Burlington. So, we don't know exactly where that's coming from. As a citizen, I don't want to be the one contributing to it, no matter how small it might seem. So moving forward, I would like to still stay with organic, give it a chance. I do think it's important to do it correctly. The aeration, the topsoil, that's what's really going to help with the safety of our children. It's going to fill in those gaps. It's going to soften and cushion our turf that right now is hard as a rock because it's not being aerated 3 times a year. God bless you. The way it should be, that topsoil is not being applied, softening it again. So I do want to see this given an opportunity through organics in an organic program that will be done properly.
Can I make my final
Yes,
point?
your other point, and then Dr. Conti
My
wanted to say
final
something.
point is,
For now.
I know from experience that once you get an organic field in good condition, it is not difficult to keep it up.
All right, Dr. Conti, and then
Just, again, with respect to the conversation, I think the safety argument is very important. I was sort of operating under the umbrella like you have an existing policy, like Mr. Murphy. So honestly, unless the policy were to change, then we're charged with following your policy, so we would move forward. The conversation to me is really about if you'd like us to enter into this program with the Recreation Department, then your policy allows us, whether existing or non-existing, to move forward in an organic way, and then we'll figure out how to pay for it. So I'm saying that
Okay.
we'll work on that. I'm not sure we have an answer how to do that tonight. Again, if the committee is interested in either voting to change their policy or introduce inorganics, then that would give us another avenue. But if not, then I think sort of initiating the Francis Wyman, it seems like the committee is clear that they want us to enter into a maintenance agreement, an enhanced maintenance agreement with the Park and Rec for the Francis Wyman field, and then explore irrigation opportunities at Memorial and at the Marshall Simons moving forward. I'm just trying to make sure I'm following everybody, and again, that's the option that I feel is on the table now, given that there's a policy in place.
okay.
Madam
Yes,
Chair, I'd like to
Mr.
make a motion.
Mr. Murphy, I just wanted to speak.
I was going to say the same thing,
Oh,
but I
okay.
think what Steve was about to say.
All right.
Before making the motion, in deference to my colleagues who feel strongly about the organic, my inclination would be keep it just all organic. And if it takes a little bit longer to get a handle on it, it takes a little bit longer. But as Mrs. Monaco says, once we do get a handle on it, maintaining it is a lot easier. So that being said, my motion would be that the school committee agree to enter into an understanding with the rec department that we will contribute up to $15,000 towards their maintenance budget in the coming fiscal year for purposes of using the Tom Irwin maintenance on the Francis Wyman playing fields, with the stipulation being that only organic materials to be used in the treatment.
Second.
Okay.
Just a
Yes,
point of
Mr.
clarification.
Nelson.
The 15,000, Tom, could come from either the operating budget or revolving accounts at the discretion of the
Yes.
administration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And Mrs. Monaco?
Between Eric and Sharon, could we please have a draft policy at the next meeting so that we don't have any trouble finding it in the future?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right.
Policy on policies?
A policy on this particular issue.
Right. Mrs. Russo? Yes.
And then a question, I guess, budgetarily, it wouldn't be just a blank 15,000. It would go through billing through Nicole.
Well, we would get an invoice, I'm assuming, from Park and Rec for the services, and
Individual service, like little bits and pieces. I'm just trying to make sure for Nicole it's manageable.
I'm sure I can work out the logistics with
Okay.
Brendan.
so we can,
Perfect.
we'll figure it out.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions before we vote on the policy? Yes, please come up. Is the green light on the microphone there?
Yes.
Good, thank you. If you could say your name and
Adam Sinesi, I just want to clarify one thing. I heard something mentioned about the 1,4-dioxin levels and where those are coming from. That actually has been established, and I served on the water committee. It's from industry that existed along the Middlesex Turnpike decades ago. Obviously, it's a concern with the wells, but I just want the people at home to understand that that's no longer, it's an issue, but it has nothing to do with how the fields are being fertilized. Thank you.
good, thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Okay. All those, so the motion is to, could we repeat the motion so we know, so I know, or Mr. Murphy, can you repeat the motion?
Forcing them to do that?
Okay.
The school committee agrees to enter into agreement with the recreation for maintenance up to $15,000 with the Tom Irwin Maintenance Program on the Francis Wyman playing field, with the understanding that all organic materials to be used, with funding through a revolving account or operating budget as administration determines.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, chair votes aye.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you all for your time, and this was a complicated issue, and it took a long time, and we had a couple rounds on this, but it is important that we take care of our children, so, thank you. The next topic on our agenda is new business. We have a custodial union contract to be approved and ratified for the contract for 2020 to 2023. Dr. Conti, you're going to address that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Bob will explain the details to you all. I just wanted to thank the custodians and their representatives. Like with all of our unions, we have a very positive relationship. I think negotiations were very productive and respectful. I want to thank them for their work. They work really hard. They keep our buildings clean. February break is, I think, or sort of after February break is an appropriate time to be ratifying this contract, because oftentimes there's lots of questions about why we have February break, and do we go to one break in March, and everyone talks about that, especially around other parts of the country. But as people have experienced, February break is important, I think, in terms of a break in learning, but I think it also breaks up some of the illnesses that we have that happen in schools, and gives the custodians a chance to really clean the buildings well, and to give us a fresh start for that run through March to April break. So again, I wanted to thank the custodians. I know it takes a lot of time. I want to make sure I thank Bob. He handled the bulk of the negotiations with the custodians, and again, I think the conversations have always been with that union respectful and productive. So with that, I think Bob can get in some of the details, or I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy wants
Yes,
to.
Mr. Murphy.
That's all right, if Bob's going to speak, I'll
Okay.
speak to him.
Just a summary of what we're going to be voting on?
Yeah,
Brief summary.
I also just wanted to say that, thank you to the custodian union for meeting with me, being gracious during the negotiations. Neither side was greedy towards each other, so the negotiations went really well. Very respectful, so I appreciate that. One of the biggest things you'll see in the paperwork in front of you is the 2.5 cost of living, so 2.5% for each year of the contract. A lot of the other negotiations were really around just contract language, clarifying, after hours and overtime and things like that. So, like I said, neither side was greedy on this, and it really made negotiations work really smooth. So I just wanted to thank them.
Basic features of the contract?
So basic features, again, the 2.5% cost of living.
Over the 3 years?
Over the 3 years, so that's each year of the contract. We also looked at when we have big overtime events. We only went up to 300 before, but we have events that are over 500, over 1,000, over 2,000 people. And it was really just about the number of custodians that would work the overtime events, so we added that language in. Summertime language is a big one. This is new to the contract, so I appreciate the willingness to work with me on this one. So what we're doing is we're looking at the number of total days during the summer that custodians would use for vacation time, just to allow them to be there with the summer help and to make sure that we can get the buildings done. So graciously, they accepted to work with me on that, so I appreciate that. And we also looked at upgrading or extending some of their longevity dollars. So the amount of time that people have been here for, we've increased those by, let's say, $100 per year across the 3 years of the contract. So that's the brief summary of it.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Murphy.
Just briefly, Madam Chair, this was my subcommittee. First of all, I want to thank Bob because he did all the work on this, and did a great job as usual. I also want to agree with everything that he said about the custodial staff. They're a great group. They do excellent work. They're hard workers, and they came into this discussion in a collaborative way. It wasn't antagonistic at all. They take great pride in the work that they do, and they love working with the kids and for the town. So I appreciate all of their efforts. And as the subcommittee rep, I would certainly recommend that we accept the proposal that's on the table.
Okay.
And I would make a motion to that effect.
Okay.
Second.
All right.
Just a point of clarification, Bob, the custodians have ratified, is this?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes, they have
they've
Motion to
ratified.
ratify.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Eiler. I apologize.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm trying to understand from the agenda, it says 2020 through 2023, which makes it sound like a 4-year budget contract, but I'm assuming this is a 3-year contract, and if so, what time period is this actually for?
July 1st.
So you have what's in front of us, so it's dated January 28th is when the tentative agreement.
Actually, I don't have it. That's why I'm asking.
Sorry. Okay. So the tentative agreement is dated January 8th of 2020. The contract language is for July 1 of 20, July 1 of 2021, and July 1 of 2022. So it's a 3-year contract effective July 1 of 20.
So it's FY 21 through 23 is the
Yes.
way to look at it.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
All right.
Take the vote again.
Any, yes. So any other questions over there? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, and the chair votes aye. That's 500. The next item is the cafeteria, the ratification of the cafeteria union contract.
And again, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say the same thing. I think the conversations with the cafeteria union were, again, were very productive and positive. And I think I want to make sure that I recognize the work that Bob did and the subcommittee did. I'm sure Mrs. Monaco will comment. Thank you for your time. I think our CAF workers work really hard, and we appreciate all their efforts to get our students fed over the course of the year. They can sometimes be a forgotten group, but their work is critical, and for many kids, including myself, lunch was a favorite subject while in school. So I want to make sure I extend my gratitude to their efforts. Bob, if you want to get into.
I do. I want to echo the same thing. The negotiations with the cafeteria staff went great. It was very friendly. We did make Miss Monaco get out of bed early, so she did attend almost all of the meetings, so thank you for that. The cafeteria is a special group, and sometimes they are underappreciated a little bit. They also did not come to the table very greedily, asking for a lot. So there's 2 things on this contract, and on this tentative agreement. One is a wage scale adjustment at 2.5%, and then the other is a 2.5% cost of living on them. That was it. They did not ask for longevity or clothing allowances or any additions to it,
Wait.
so
Yes, they did. There's a clothing allowance increase.
it's language clarification. It's not an increase to
Clarification,
the
sorry,
budget.
okay, and senior, okay. Some other
So,
clarification language.
Again, we had very few meetings with them, and like I said, very cordial during negotiations, made it easy to agree to these terms.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Monaco.
I would like to give a shout out to the cafeteria workers because they take really good care of our kids. They really care and they do a great job. And I enjoy working with that group. I've worked with them for quite a few years now whenever their contract comes up. And aside from making me get up early for the meetings because they had to be to school to take care of our children, it worked out great. And there is one thing, though, that I would like to see if we can add to this ratification. And that is that the substitutes for the cafeteria do not make quite minimum wage. And I would like part of this contract to include giving the cafeteria substitutes minimum wage.
Well, we can't vote on the substitutes anymore, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, how would we do
Well,
that?
we're gonna vote on
Yes,
No,
Dr.
We can do
Conti?
it at a separate meeting then, but I would like to put that forward, that I'd like to increase the,
I think we can have a conversation about that. I don't think we are including substitute pay in the contract. I don't believe it's in the contract now.
yeah, it's not in the
It's not in the
contract, okay.
contract.
So I'm saying, I'm not disagreeing with the idea. All I'm saying, if we could ratify the contract for the full-time employees, and then if we want to discuss substitute pay, we can look at substitute pay as a separate line item.
Okay, Martha, right
Yes.
after we vote, could I
Okay.
have the floor to ask for that?
Yes.
Thank
you
you.
may. Do we have a motion?
I
So
move the,
moved.
yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, you move it.
I move that the committee vote to ratify the proposed contract for the cafeteria employees.
Second.
Was that a second?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other questions about this? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The chair votes aye. Mrs. Monaco, you have the floor.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that the cafeteria substitutes hourly pay be raised to the minimum wage, effective immediately.
Effective immediately for this fiscal year.
Yes, and I have a question, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
And
Okay.
Bobby, I heard that there was another group. I heard there was another group that had the same thing done and it was retroactively applied. Do you know the answer to that?
I'm unfamiliar with that. So I know that another group, years prior to, the wage was adjusted because they could not get people to fill the positions.
Well, they can't get them in the cafeteria. That's
but I don't-
part of the reason I'd like it to go to minimum
I
wage.
can't answer whether it was retroactive without any research on it, so.
Okay, well, so effective immediately would
Okay.
work for me.
Mr. Murphy and then Dr. Conti. Yeah.
On the motion, at the risk of sounding like a Grinch, I would, before
Grinch.
voting on something like this, I'd just like a better idea of what the current policy or practice is and what the fiscal implications are, and is it a problem? It sounds like it's a problem. If
tiny.
If it's a problem, then we should address it, but
It's
I
a
just
tiny
have
amount.
no information, so I'm a little uncomfortable voting on it.
Yeah, so currently, right now, we're paying $12 per hour, and as of January 1st, 2020, it went up to $12.75 per hour.
We didn't go.
We're not required under the state law to follow that, so, not that we wouldn't have looked to address it, it's just that we weren't required to do it as of January 1. Obviously, we're in February right now, so.
Minimum wage is $12.75.
Yes,
So-
so it's
so
75 cents an hour
Okay.
for the substitutes,
Right.
which they can't get anyway, so it's not a lot of money.
No, I'm agreeing. What I'm saying, Mr. Murphy, through the chair,
That answers my question.
right, so
Okay.
I think that we could go to minimum.
That removes my hesitation.
Okay, and just to clarify for Mrs. Monaco, going retroactive prior to January really wouldn't make sense.
Okay, that's fine.
Anyway, so if we could do effective immediately, I think that would be okay.
And I would like to clarify then that you're saying that this year's budget, and I'm hoping Ms. Kosh is also listening, that this year's budget can support us doing this effective immediately. Because I support this, I just don't want to, I mean, I don't think it's going to blow up the budget, but it's fine.
Not
Can
sure
we-
that we can answer that completely right now,
Uh-huh.
given that we don't know everything that's going to happen, but I don't think this would be the straw that,
Okay.
that causes that issue.
All right,
I think we'll break it other ways.
yes. So, Ms. Marcus, yes.
Diana Marcus, BEA President. Are there any other workers who do not make minimum wage in the Burlington school system?
Again, I don't believe so, and again, everyone was making minimum wage. The change happened in January. We are adjusting to that change now. So I'm not sure I can answer that question. I have to see if we didn't make any of those adjustments to other hourly employees.
One other follow-up question. With the fight for 15 that we went through in order to bring up the minimum wage is going to continue to increase. Would this motion ensure that people would continue to get an increase as the minimum wage increases?
Again, that's
Dr.
always
Conti?
been our intention. I can't speak for the committee.
Yeah, I recognize that municipal employees are not necessarily covered by minimum wage, but I think that ethical hiring practices should require that, would require that we pay at least minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcus, for bringing that up. I would like you to check into that and make sure that there aren't other categories of workers that we have in the district who are now not making minimum wage after January. So we have a motion.
It's the only one I know of that isn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so, but I'll check. I just don't want to say.
I just point of clarification,
yes,
I think if
Mr.
we're gonna add other individuals, we ought to do it knowingly and by a separate motion at another meeting.
Yes, we will. I'm just
Okay.
not sure if there's any other group of employees that would qualify.
I also, we haven't voted on it yet, but I think that it seems to be the sense of the committee that when we build the budget for next year, that this is the kind of thing we want to be sure is included. So, is there further discussion on Mrs. Monaco's motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Aye.
opposed? Abstained?
No, I just want to clarify
Well,
that
ca-
it's
can we-
effective immediately.
That was said, yeah.
Yeah.
Chair votes aye, so that's 500.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Cafeteria thanks you also.
Okay. The next item on our agenda are the hot topic for tonight, the draft budget for fiscal '21. We are going to have our first presentations tonight, and I'm going to let Dr. Conti or Ms. Kasha determine who goes when, where, and how. So if you would want to take that on, then please do.
Again, I'll start and then pass it over to the folks who are here. We're joined by some folks. I just want to thank them for their time presenting the budget. And again, I think the fruits of Ms. Kasha's labor over the last few years are being reaped now. I think with the budget documents are, I hope, much more easy to follow. And some of the comparisons make much more sense now that we have prior years to make those comparisons to. So I want to make sure I thank Nicole, Ms. Kasha, for her work, and I'll turn it over to her for the budget summaries of the areas that were identified in the agenda.
Sure, so tonight, budget sessions, we have curriculum, health services, IT, library, maintenance, and custodial. I believe you all received a handout that looks like this.
Did you
Just
folks get this?
just to sort of help you navigate the budget document. Gives you which line number each of the departments is. I know curriculum was listed first, but
Yeah, I'd rather have, I'm gonna be here, but people that have to, that came in for the meeting, I'd rather have them go first, so if
Yeah.
we can start with health services, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Fine with me.
Health
We're going to look on line
services.
56.
Line 56. Okay. If you could direct the microphone toward yourself and tell everyone who's watching your name, that would be great. And your role here, your important role here.
Thank you for picking me first.
Okay.
I'm Barbara Conley. I'm the nurse leader for the school district, and thank you for inviting me here this evening. I did put a PowerPoint presentation together because I'm going to be sharing some numbers with you, so I thought it would be easier to follow. So the first thing is I would like to thank you for your continued support to our health services department. We are better than we ever have been. We've grown leaps and bounds in the last 2 years. We've improved our education, our professional development. We've improved our training in data and documentation. We have also improved and developed many policies and procedures for the school district. And due to the growth in the staffing, we are now meeting our mandatory screenings much quicker at a better platform, improved healthcare plans, and have better collaboration for the screenings with the teachers. So the result of that is better services and meeting the medical and safety needs of our students in our district. I do want to share with you that some things that are going on in our department this year. So I put this grid together to show you kind of all the schools broken down, the student enrollment, the present FTE, and what my recommendations are for next year. I do want to let you know that the student enrollment does include, in specific schools, the lab program, and also at Francis Wyman, the Sprouts. Reason being is that we are the backup for the lab program if the nurse is out sick and they don't have coverage. And the Francis Wyman nurse is the nurse for Sprouts during the school day till about 12:30. So as the years gone by, I saw some influx of increase of acuity in some buildings, so I ran some numbers. And I compared our last 4 years in the fall. I can't compare the spring because it hasn't happened. And these were very alarming to me. We have had a 31.5% increase in services and workload to the Health Services Department in 4 years. So you can see the numbers have gone up about 5,000 encounters. So I further broke it down and said, where's this happening? So I broke it down with the 4 years and the schools again. And as you can see, I highlighted where my concerns were noted. First one was at Fox Hill, where it significantly jumped up from 17 to 2018. You could see almost 2,000 jump. This is a twofold reason. The nurses have gotten a lot of education on data entry, so we have it in our system accurately. Additional, we have some very high acuity medical concern students in that building. Francis Wyman, I knew was a concern. I presented about that last year, and it is consistently a concern. Her numbers are very high. In comparison to the Burlington High School and the middle school that have 2 nurses, these buildings are functioning on 1 nurse. When I did see these numbers, I consulted with the school physician because I have to get her authorization, because both of our names on our state document, pulling a nurse from the high school or middle school to help support the elementary schools that obviously have a higher acuity level. She agreed that it was the appropriate thing to do, so that is what we have been doing this year. We have been pulling the high school nurse, and we were pulling the middle school nurse, but we had to stop doing that because we had 2 new medical students. They were existing students, but new medical diagnoses that I couldn't pull that second nurse. So this is what's been going on. So then I broke it down to show you a grid. And it shows you that Fox Hill is covering 23.5% of the encounters for our whole complete district, and she is working by herself. Hence the reason why I pulled the high school nurse and occasionally the middle school nurse to support her. Additionally, the Francis Wyman nurse is covering 18.9%, and that's even higher than the high school numbers. Now, these numbers are going to trickle, and I'm going to get into detail about why I think these are high, but these are concerns and very alarming to me. When I see these numbers, I think there's a safety concern in these buildings with this nurse being by themselves. So I broke it down and I said, all right, what's happening? So the state last year did tell us that they were seeing it at preschools, a much higher level of medical acuity, medical needs in the preschools. So I looked to see, is that the cause? Boy, I couldn't believe the numbers. Food allergies, just the increase in 1 year. ADD and ADHD increase. The anxiety in the behavioral emotional, which is a big topic that we've been talking about district-wide in every areas. We have a new diagnosis that's come into our district called FPIES, which is a food protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome. Is very serious if it happens. Essentially, the student needs to be brought to the hospital immediately if they are exposed to their allergen. We've had a major increase in the number of diabetics in our district, blood disorders, and other allergies. So what kind of impact does this cause for my department? Safety for the students, inability to support field trips and support programs within our school district, and the lack of FTE support. So what have I been doing? I've been floating the nurses to cover to help support these elementary schools. So the schools that are required by the state to have 2 nurses, I've been pulling those nurses to cover where there's higher acuity in our district. The high school and the middle school nurses have been pulled 20 times this year to support that need. I myself have also assisted 16 days either in the offices or on field trips, and I've also missed 2 state meetings that help support me do my job. Having at least 1 to 2 buildings every day should have 2 nurses have 1. This is unsafe. We have a very limited sub pool. There's a nursing shortage. I can't find subs. We're one of the highest paying districts, and I just am not getting applicants. The applicants I get are only available 1 or 2 days a week and inconsistent days. This is a safety issue. We're not appropriately staffed to support the medical complex needs at Fox Hill and Francis Wyman. So last year I presented to you that we weren't meeting the medical to the nurse to student ratios at the high school and the middle school. We were at the high school, but I needed that additional nurse at the middle school. So thank you for granting that. But we're still under at Francis Wyman. We really need that second nurse at Francis Wyman. She's well over the 500. I believe her number is 602. At Fox Hill, she's 460. She's very close, but the medical acuity is extremely high in her building. There's such an increased medical need for covering medical conditions and needing services in our schools. With a backup for the lab program, the high school nurses are actually the lab nurse. They cover 56 students, they give 5 daily meds, and they have several students with EpiPens and Diastat. Additionally, the elementary schools that are already in overload have covered 10 days this year because they can't find nurses either. Field trips. We have averaged about 100 trips per year, and about 40 to 50% of them now need a nurse on the trip because of the medical needs of the students. The teachers can't be trained because it's something that has to be given and supported by a nurse. 7 field trips have either had to be rescheduled or canceled due to lack of having a nurse for the trip. Lack of staff to support special education programs and field trips. There's a life skills program at the middle school and high school. They would like to take their students out to the district, but I don't have the ability to give them the staff to support those programs. Elementary special ed and preschool students need more hands-on support. That's why we need those additional nurses in those buildings. The lack of FTU support. Appropriate staffing in every school is absolutely essential for the safety of our children. I don't have coverage for sick calls, personal days, medical leave, personal days, bereavement. The nurses have to go to an IEP 504 meeting. It's very difficult to find coverage for them to be at that meeting and not have to be pulled out to attend to a student's need. Screening, it takes about 90 days of FTE time to cover those. New student enrollment and new medical diagnoses coming in is very, very time consuming on the nurses in creating individual healthcare plans for every child's need. And last thing, covering lunches, planning time, support groups, increased education. More nursing in the district gives us the capability of getting in those classes and giving more proactive teaching to these students. Hand washing, coughing etiquette. These all prevent us from getting flu. We need to get in those classrooms and teach that. It is very critical to have a reliable staff to cover for safe care. So in conclusion, my professional opinion, 2 additional nurses are needed to support the safety of the students and the district needs. So I have 4 discussion points. Does anybody have any questions about the medical condition list that I shared? Okay. Additionally, I just want to make sure that you were aware, a couple months ago, Fox News got a hold of the DPH list of schools that did not meet this 1 to 750 requirement, but their recommendation is the 500. This is what I shared with you last year. If we hadn't gotten that additional nurse last year, and I didn't place her at Marshall Simons, we would have been on that list. So there was well over 27 schools on that list that are not complying, and they do not have medication delegation of EpiPen to their staff members. So the only one that can administer an EpiPen in their building is actually the school nurse. Case scenarios. We've had several case scenarios in the district where a nurse unfortunately was by herself, and she was luckily enough to get the attention of somebody else that could go and run and help her to assist another student that was going down. Without that support, I am very fearful of what would have happened. So it is very, very critical that we definitely need 2 nurses at that elementary level. The last thing is the school physician has written an email to both Dr. Conti and Mr. Larkin in support of my request. She is additionally also fearful of the consequences if we do not implement 2 more nurses in these buildings. Does anybody have any questions?
Can I add something just through the chair? First, I just want to thank the nurses and Barbara for their flexibility. It's literally like, you know, every day, like who goes where. And just to reiterate, like if people in the audience, because Barbara's, you know, educated me over the last few years about acuity, if you don't know what that means like some students have higher medical needs. So, you know, the numbers alone don't mean a heck of a lot. If you're like 460 or 500, yeah, 500 is the magic number. But 460 with 3 or 4 kids that might have some significant medical concerns, like creates a whole different ballgame at a particular school. So if a nurse is called to a classroom to help tend to that student, the likelihood of something else happening at some point is pretty good when you work in schools. Luckily, at this point, it hasn't. Again, we're meeting the bare minimum, like we're meeting the minimum, but we'd be able to be proactive and I think sleep better. And just to Barbara's point, we can't find these people to come in and help us on a day-to-day basis. So the other thing's great about that, as we increase our staff, if we can add the staff, we'll also have our resource nursing staff will be in place. So if we have somebody out at a school where these students with significant needs, just calling a sub in is not the most helpful thing. Having somebody that comes in is already knows these kids, knows what's going on, they hit the ground running, so if something does happen, we're up to speed and can deal with that issue as fast as possible. So there's a lot of different levels to that. I just want to thank Barbara for, again, her work and the staff being so flexible. The high school staff, as she said, in particular, has bumped out, and we do have the preschool nurse who's here as a backup on the site when that happens. But they've been, you know, just incredible on a day-to-day basis, so I just wanted to make that noted.
Thank you, Patrick, and I just want to tell you how wonderful he's been and very, very supportive to the department. He's almost practically a nurse at this point. I'm about ready to put him in a building.
I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express one
And
night,
again,
so.
Eric, thank you again, because he's always been extremely approachable, and he listens to my concerns and advocates and so forth. So I do appreciate both of you tremendously. So, any other questions?
Okay. Mrs. Monaco?
I don't have a question, I have a statement. I have a grandson who's 6 years old who has diabetes, type 1 fragile diabetes. And if you go into their kitchen, there is an iPad on the kitchen windowsill where his blood sugar is read by the meter on his body every 5 minutes. The school nurse has to carry for any child that has diabetes, and there are often multiple kids in a building with type 1 diabetes. The school nurse has to carry either a phone or a monitor of some sort around with her. If she goes to the bathroom, if she goes to the cafeteria, she can't leave that monitor on her desk. She has to have it with her every minute of every day. And she has to keep them all straight so that she knows which kid has which monitor. In addition to that, the school nurse has
the kids with food allergies, the kids with other illnesses that take detailed watching all the time. If you have a diabetic whose number goes way up or way down, you got a big problem. If it goes way down, the kid passes out.
Correct.
Sure, you can shoot them up with, what is it, glucogen, and then they're in the hospital for 3 days. I mean, you can't let it go until that happens. These nurses have to be right on it all the time. Times have really changed. It didn't used to be like this. And last year, you gave an impassioned plea, and I went out in the community in the following couple of weeks, and I had people say to me, oh, that's ridiculous. You know, I went to school and we didn't have a nurse, and, you know, times have really, really changed. And we need these nurses. It's just, it's not right, it's not safe. So when we had the guidelines meeting with Ways and Means and the whole Finance Committee, I made an issue of it at that meeting too, that you need the staffing, especially since you can't get subs. And if you did get a sub who wasn't familiar with the kids with these problems, I mean, they might not handle it well.
Right. And to
So-
interject, the subs that I do have told me that they will not work in certain buildings by themselves.
Yeah, because they
Because
don't know
they're
the kids
fearful,
with the
they don't
needs.
know the children. They'll have two diabetics, they look at the monitor, they're both crashing, which way do I go?
Yeah,
And you've got two, and there's one of you, and you're the only one that can care for them.
you're
So
the
it's
only one that
very
can give them the
complicated.
insulin.
Yes,
Or the gummy bears, or whatever
Correct.
the problem is at
Correct.
the moment, if it's
Yep.
high or if it's low.
Yep.
So I could not support this any more strongly, because I see it with my own eyes, and I know you need these nurses. And I think that when we discussed it at the it wasn't Ways and Means, but it was at the guideline meetings, I think the point was made, and I think the point was accepted, that we really do need the nurses.
I thank you for your support.
You've got it.
Yes, Mrs. Russo.
I just have a question to start. So looking at page, I think it's 5 through 8, I'm,
Okay.
yeah, where we have the, so it appears that there are 3 nurses being requested, or am I wrong? I see Fox Hill, I see Francis Wyman, and then one,
So this was,
Okay.
this was all compiled prior to the committee approving the additional nurse.
Okay.
On January, I think, 14th. or-
okay.
Uh,
So we're,
Our plan is to carry that nurse forward, so we would fulfill the 3 FTEs if we add 2. And that would fulfill Barbara's request.
Correct,
And,
for the 2, okay.
correct.
And now, as a teacher, there are some moments when it's the nurse who rises above the principal. We talk about having a vice principal or second principal in these schools, but I cannot tell you how many times that their plan changes. And I'm a teacher, I don't have a medical background, and I rely on that nurse to explain exactly what I'm reading, explain exactly what it is that I need to be looking for, that I need to be doing in order to keep these children healthy and safe. And I can't even imagine on the times that I've needed the nurse instantly if she was already being, used, doing something else, helping another student. And, the nurse is truly a backbone for the schools at this point. I hear what Mrs. Monco's saying, we didn't have nurses when we grew up, but it's completely different, and it's different for the best, because we have students that might not have been there when we were growing up with us, that are enhancing our classrooms and enhancing our lives in just amazing ways. But we need the nurse, the teachers need the nurse, the students need the nurse, so we can be teaching them and we can be taking care of them appropriately. So, I know it's a tight budget, and we'll find other ways, but these two nurses, with those numbers, it's eye-opening, it's staggering to me, from a parent, from teacher, and from school committee to see that. So I definitely appreciate your time, and will be supporting it moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Mr. Murphy?
No, sir. Nice job.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing this. I clearly support this, and yet I'm sitting here going, you were the first person to present us with what you need next year. So my question is, where did the nurse that we did hire mid-year end up? Was that it?
She actually is starting April. I just got her start date. I think it's March 12th.
Okay, and
Yep.
she will be working in a building?
She will be a resource nurse for the
okay.
district.
Which
But she
means-
that means that she floats throughout the
Okay.
district and supports the need, but will be predominantly at those two elementary
Okay.
schools.
Great,
Correct.
Thank you. Dr. Conti, any?
No, again,
Okay.
Barbara, thank you.
Yes,
Again,
thank
you have
you.
a very complicated job. We appreciate having you here. Your expertise helps us out. I just wanted to sort of echo what the chair mentioned. This is our first budget, so
Yeah.
again, this is part of a much larger conversation. And I do want to thank Barbara for her patience, because we really said this would be a 2-year effort to try to expand your staffing to where it needed to be, and I think so that Barbara's request is very consistent with that conversation. So I'm saying I appreciate you sticking to a multi-year plan, and so this is something that we've been focusing on for a couple years. So I just want to say that. So thank you very much. It's sometimes hard to keep the effort when you don't get everything all at once, and I think you've sort of been very patient with us, and I think I just wanted to appreciate that, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Conti.
Yes. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Conti, which category shall we go to next? Well,
We can just go in order from there. IT was next, and then library.
all right. Who's here tonight for IT? Jose? Great. And Dennis Solano. Okay, thank you.
Do you guys want the other adapter, or are you good?
Do you need some help with the technology there?
Yes, we do. Yeah. Good evening. Thanks for having me too over here today. I have my speaker, Dennis. Right. So yes, let me start with the budget. So we propose this year level funded, if that is a word, I guess. So there are no increases in operations. There is only really a new item, which is we're asking for your assistance that we need a new staff member in the group. And I feel bad after Barbara's presentation, bringing the numbers of, the amount of calls that have really happened this year. We used to be, in previous years, pretty good with, probably 10 to 20 calls in queue. This year we started with 120, I think it was on the first week. And it is now that we are leveling up to 70. But the demand has increased really, and there is only 3, counting with me, technicians, if you want to put it that way, just to resolve all the problems over here in the district.
So one thing I would just add to that, although I'm not in IT, and I often think people think I am, but I'm obviously on the educational technology side. My team is the instructional technology specialist in the building, what we call ITS, Ed Tech Integrationists. They're really seen as the first level of school support. They're there to communicate the issues to Jose and his team through their ticketing system. I think one of the things that they've seen over the past couple of years is the amount of technology in our schools is outstanding, which is the positive, right? We have great resources. We have one-to-one. We have lots of these new things I talked about in the grant tonight, robotics and drones and programming resources. but that all takes support. And their level of support has had to go up quite a bit. So they're not IT either. They're teachers, and that's their role, and that's why they're hired here. So I think what they're seeing is a greater demand on Jose and his department and his team, and just to make sure that the needs of the kids every day, the iPads, if it's not working or if it's broken, it gets replaced so it doesn't hurt their time instructionally. Network issues. There's a lot of these resources require a lot of database in the background. It's maybe not necessarily in a classroom, but it's setting up accounts and management, things that a systems admin does. So that need has grown quite a bit as we've added more web-based resources and subscription services, online resources. So I think, Jose, while it's hard to describe the numbers to you on a day-to-day basis, talking to my team, they're very able to explain the need for this and the need for another network level technician. Where it doesn't seem like it would affect the instruction in the classroom every day, it really does. If something isn't working, his team is there to solve those problems.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dr.
just briefly, just for some background and some history, Jose mentioned the number of incidents, almost as if it were anecdotal. We do have a system called School Dude, so we do keep track of the list of requests for fixes that do come in. So when Jose mentions the backlog of calls, that's actual calls that we're coming in for teacher requests. And if the lesson is built around integrating the technology and the technology isn't working, our teachers are great at adapting, but as they spend that time adapting, we're losing instructional time. My perspective is this is actually a replacement position. One of the issues with our technicians working in Burlington is that they're very desirable by other districts. And so a couple years ago, Winchester hired away one of our technicians to run their tech department, and we did not replace that position. So this isn't, from my perspective, an ad. This is basically restoring a position that we lost. We currently have sort of 2 lower-level technicians, and again, we never replaced the other technician. And Jose, you've been picking up the work. I think the other people have been picking it up. Dennis, you mentioned that there's been a lot of school-based teachers who've been picking up some of the work, but we're really missing that position. So this is a restoration of a position that existed. Dennis, help me out. A couple years ago, is that what it is? Three
And
years
just
ago?
One thing also to keep in mind, if you look at the number of devices that Jose supports, one-to-one alone, and the staff, comparatively speaking to other districts, the department is still very small. Many districts have a much larger IT department to support less devices. So there's certainly a need there. I think there have been some districts that have reached out to us because they're surprised that Jose is able to accomplish what he's able to do with two other people. So the need is growing, and that's a positive, like I said before. All of these things require support, and I just think that one of the things that Jose has mentioned with the School Dude, that's the ticketing system Dr. Conti mentioned, we never saw numbers, at this time of year, you'd see that number be relatively low. Get to February vacation and everyone would be caught up. And those numbers were much higher the last couple of years than they've ever been. So people are waiting for some things. Teachers and students are waiting for some things that even with his team's best effort, it's hard to get to all of those things.
And again, just one other question or clarification for the committee is we spent a lot of time over the years, and I know, Jose, we sort of have a combined technology department with general government as well, but their technology needs and use has also increased as well. So I think you're seeing more demand because you do work on both sides. So you're seeing more demand on the general government side as well. So it's not like we can borrow someone from general government because they're as busy as our folks are here. Is that? I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. So there's still a collaborative effort between schools and general government in technology, but both of our uses are going up. And again, we need to restore the position that we lost 3 or 4 years ago. So that's going to be the need.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Eiler, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This may be a question for Dr. Conti. Just procedurally, on each of these budgets, there may be, 4 or 5 things that we'd like to just drill down on a little bit. Is it is it more beneficial to do that in our subcommittee meetings with you or here?
I think you can ask the questions here, so they're out, and then if we can't answer them or say we'll need to follow up, then we can do it, we can try to do it later and try.
Okay,
And they
sure.
say, well, we'll try,
We'll
we
give it a
can.
shot.
All right.
If it's taking too long, we can push
Yes.
it off to the other meetings. So did just want to drill down a couple of line items. So I was curious that this print management program for 85,000, what's that all about?
That is to pay for repairs, supplies, or for all the printers that are being used in the school and the town.
Okay, so, and that leads to a more general question. In a lot of the department budgets, we're seeing supplies for copiers and printers in those separate budgets. So I'm trying to understand what is supplied centrally and what is dealt with in each department.
Jose, we'll jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. So the actual word printer is what's being covered in Jose's or the IT budget. So a single-use printer in the department. An actual copy machine is something budgeted by it. I know that they can be a multifunction machine, but more of the lower level 30-page desktop printers is what we're covering in the IT department. Each individual department, let's say high school main office, if they choose to have a copier or multiple copiers, then that's something that they would budget for and the supplies for in their budget.
Okay, so you're supplying toner or ink for printers per se, and MFPs are maybe handled in the individual departments?
Correct.
Okay, great. And do we have, is that equipment generally leased or owned?
So the printers are bought. Copy machines are generally leased, but there are some throughout the district that have been purchased.
Okay, and is there an attempt to have some uniformity in that so we can, get supplies in bulk, or does everyone have their own brand, or how does that work?
It would be an ideal situation. Typically, our copies are purchased or leased off the state, so the Massachusetts state bid list. Because of that, and because of when the budgets are available, so they're all over the place. So technically, we would have to either have people extend their contracts 1 to 2 years or not, or go without, in order to kind of get on that same cycle. We have looked at it when it's possible or feasible. We've either dropped or added machines to get in that same cycle. But I don't necessarily agree that there would be a benefit because of the state contract pricing. A few years ago, it used to be the price did include maintenance and toner. Now when it comes to copy, it includes maintenance but not toner. Okay. So a higher volume office is going to use more toner. They're on the hook and need to supply that in their budget, whereas in previous state bid lists, it was covered.
Okay.
The printers themselves, you try to buy the same model.
So, yes, so what Dr. Conti just mentioned was printers themselves. Typically, when it comes to printers, computers, you would have 1 to 2 years where they would have roughly the same model. Maybe the last model changed, but the toner and parts are the same. We'll do that for those current years. Year 3 comes along, and obviously we'd be looking at a new one. But if we're buying somewhere between 4 and 5 every couple of years, then we'll have those consistent numbers throughout.
Okay, and I know that's hard to do. And then the classroom projectors, what is our goal in terms of projectors? Is it one in every classroom, one at certain levels? Where are we trying to end up here?
We're typically there already right now, and it is almost one in every single classroom or every single teaching space.
Is that's true at all grade levels? Or?
Yeah, and it's not, like you said, it's not limited to just what we call a typical classroom. So you may go into the fitness center and you'll see a projector down there. You may go into an auditorium, you will go into auditoriums and you'll see projectors there. Conference rooms, certain ones you'll see them in. So any place where we can either have multiple people or bring students into a teaching space where it's valuable to have one, we'll have a projector in there.
So we think we're saturated there now, and the 50K is just rotating.
That's exactly what it
maintenance
is.
on keeping that up. Okay.
Correct.
All right, and then just a final one here, and maybe this is the same thing. I'm unclear. So there's this print management program, but then there's also computer supplies of 150,000. What does that entail?
That is for equipment for the staff. equipment for the staff, teachers.
Okay,
servers.
so it's meaning iPads, or what kind of equipment are we talking about?
So it's the replacement of teacher devices. It's any dongles, let's say, or adapters that we would need, or supplies that way. So let's say if we rotate one school per year, or more than that, our smallest school is gonna have 65 teachers in there. So that would be buying 65 devices, 65 dongles, let's say any type of replacement bulbs, 4 projectors, any technology support needs microphones for the sound systems. That's what that equipment, equipment line item would be for.
Great, thanks. That's my list for this one.
All right, does anyone have any other questions or comments for
Just
Mr.
comment
D'Souza
is,
and Mr. Valano?
because technology changes so much, we try to attack it from a number of different budgeting perspectives. So we have lots of technology in the operating budget, which you've seen. We also if you guys have lived through this for a while, we've jump-started some of our technology when we've done new building projects, and then we'll also jump-start some of our technology through the warrant process. So we haven't talked about warrants yet, but you may see some technology needs or requests coming in through the warrants as well. So we sort of attack technology in multiple ways to try to keep up, to make sure the devices are working. And then, Mr. Eiler, to your point, is we try not to do everything all at once, but we try to keep ahead of the obsolescence that naturally occurs in this environment. And so, again, we try to replace stuff a building at a time, or get on a 3 to 4 year rotation with the equipment.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for all the work you do and for preparing the budget and being thoughtful about it. And so hopefully we'll be able to fund everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're not gonna stay with me?
Oh, no. I'm
Okay,
not.
all right. Next, we have the library department, or what used to. Yeah?
Well, before I get to the budget, I just want to
Okay.
mention a couple of highlights for the library. We really do have an awesome library team. I always want to thank them for what they do. 2 members recently had some recognition. I've just taken this opportunity. I know I'll do it quickly.
Okay.
Rachel Small, our library teacher at Pine Glen, recently got her doctorate of education, is now Dr. Rachel Small. So I wanted to make sure we recognized her. And this I may not even be supposed to announce this yet, but Callie Graham, our Burlington High School library teacher, is going to get a large award from the Massachusetts School Library Association soon. So some great recognition for what she's doing here at the high school. So a great team, and it makes it much easier to work with when they collaborate together on budget, requests or concerns or anything like that. As far as the budget goes, one last thank you to Fadine Soterio, who helps Jose as well organize budgets for all her efforts on this. We worked it out so that there would be a 0% level funded for this year. I do think there will be some possible needs next fiscal year for contracted services. We typically see some of those go up on basically a 3-year change Follett, which supplies our main library automation system. Those contracted services do tend to go up after a couple of years. So this year we were able to keep everything at 0%, but that may be something we have to see some increases in moving forward.
All right, any questions from the committee?
Again,
All right, good work.
Final
Dr.
sense of gratitude. Dennis has really took the lead, and there was a warrant article, and so I want to make sure I thank Ways and Means, thank the committee for supporting warrant article, for creating some, I think, some pretty high-tech learning spaces. We're calling it
Area 123.
The area here is called Area 123, and it's right up the hall, so we will schedule it, not tonight, we're busy, but at some point, we'll walk the school committee up so you can see the Area 123, which will allow the expansion of instruction, e-sporting, and I think that's happening both at the middle school and at the high school level.
We're hoping to we'll have competitive esports at the high school right away, but we're also hoping to get that down to the middle school level. There's about 200 colleges right now providing esports scholarships. And so we have quite a few students who are seeing the opportunity that they may be able to get a partial, even a full scholarship to college for competition. One other warrant that happened last year that we're working on right now is Francis Wyman will be going through a full remodel of the library space, what we call Learning Commons, be furniture, some technology going into the room. It hasn't been updated in many years, so this really will be doing carpeting and everything in that space. Will be a full update of the Francis Wyman Learning Commons over the next, probably planning in the summer.
And that's scheduled for the summer?
Scheduled for the
All
summer.
right, and so thank you. I know that's a lot of extra work, so thank you for taking care of that. And we'd love to show both groups the space when we can fit it into our
Yeah.
schedule. So
Okay.
it's right up the hall. And thank you. And Dennis, thank the
Okay.
librarians.
Did you folks have any questions about library services? Okay. Thank you very much.
And Jose, please thank your team as well.
Yes.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, and so next we'll do maintenance. Is that what's on the list next? Okay.
So I know it's two separate items, but maintenance and custodial, same.
Okay.
I will talk about them individually. So our maintenance department, we do have a great team. I'm surprised at the amount of projects and the quality of work that they're able to do. So I definitely would like to thank them. You'll see a similar trend in a lot of the budgets being presented throughout this, the budget process, but we also came in at a 0% increase. We're very fortunate in what we're able to be funded and the support that we get from the school committee. And, you know, as has come up in other conversations, in a jam, we're able to use the buildings and ground rentals if need be. We've had gracious support from the town and this board as well with warrant articles as far as painting projects and other building projects. So our team stays busy and, like I said, level funded, so we appreciate the support in the maintenance department.
Okay. Questions about the maintenance department? Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple easy ones here, I think. How many vehicles are we maintaining in the school department?
I'm gonna say 2.25.
Okay, so it's relatively small, okay.
Okay.
One somewhat working, okay. And
Yeah.
it's just looking at the plumbing in particular, but just in general with, you know, the trades like, you know, plumbing, electricity and so on. Are those all handled in-house or do we need to bring in outside contractors for that, or how are those things handled? You know, $75,000 for plumbing, for instance.
Yeah, so as far as state law goes, when it comes to plumbing, we do have to handle that outside, so we went for a bid process, and we have an outside vendor that comes in. We're able to perform the most minimal plumbing tasks in-house, but once it gets to even, like I said, replacing a faucet, once we disconnect those lines, that's when technically a plumber has to come in, as far as the building process goes. So we try to do what we can in-house, but realistically, a lot of it is outsourced.
Is that true even if we have, you know, certified plumbers on staff? Or?
No, but I want to make sure I answer your question. We can hire a certified plumber on staff, but it would be much more expensive than the $75,000 to have a certified plumber available for the year. So we always look at that crossover. We do have a licensed electrician on staff, and we have a licensed HVAC boiler person because the crossover made sense for us. So we always look at what makes sense, when to bring people on and when to contract out. And I don't think we've crossed that yet in plumbing. And it may be the case that we do that depending on the work that takes place or is upcoming, you know, with some of the other, we have aging buildings, so we look at that every year, is what I'm trying to say poorly.
So that's part of the definition that I left out, so I apologize, but that 75 you're seeing is for parts and labor.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, does anyone else have any comments or questions? No. Okay, thank you for that report. And
If I could add one more thing?
yes,
So while you're not seeing it right there, there is an additional request for an employee in the maintenance department, similar to what we had discussed with the IT department. A few years ago, we did have an employee who took a new adventure and moved away from working with us, and we did not fill that position. Again, workload did not decrease, and we've been able to handle it, but it has been a burden for the current staff that's there. So there is a request to, you know, reinstate that one position. It would be a mid to lower level position, so Hopefully, if we could make it fit, it would be ideal, and it would definitely help the team out.
Okay, great. Thank you. And did you want to also comment on the custodial, that's listed here separately, so,
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So,
and that's page
61?
Yes.
line 61.
Yeah, line 61. Yeah. So the custodians are going to get praised at least twice tonight by me.
Okay.
So again, once for the negotiations that we discussed earlier, but two, for the work that they've done. I think that it's been said for years and years that as you walk around these buildings, the pride that they take in them, keeping them clean, maintaining them, the countless hours that goes into them, I think is great. It does, or potentially may have hurt us in some MSBA submissions, but at the same exact time, we have safe, clean, and well-maintained buildings. So as far as the custodians go, this is not their salaries, this is just the supplies that we use system-wide, also level funded this year. So, again, thank you to the custodial team.
I have a quick question.
All right, Mr. Nelson?
Bob, just a point of clarification, when you said the maintenance budget was at 0%, is that including the adding of that new position, or is that separate and apart?
It's 0% increase, not including the position.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's a 0 plus whatever that position is,
Right.
okay.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
If I could just add.
Ms. Kasha, did you have something?
You all received this handout tonight.
Okay.
And it just sort of shows
Did you-
the trends and expenses for custodial supplies, so to justify our rationale for level funding there.
So supply costs have actually declined. They've done a good job. Is that, if I'm reading this correctly?
Just please leave the
Pretty
star.
average. The last, the
Oh, year to date.
114,000 is
Oh,
just
it's
the year to
year-to-date.
date.
I got it.
So it's the other three numbers on there.
Are relatively
So
consistent.
staggering
Yeah,
around the
all right,
55.
perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't read that correctly. And through the chair, Bob, you're
Yes.
not looking to add any additional custodial staff?
Currently, no.
All right. Okay, so the last item is the curriculum. Mr. Larkin, thank you.
Just to keep with the trend, this is also level funded from last year, so there's no significant changes, and people have the backup. So there's no, I don't have any clarifications on why I need something additional, so I'll just open it up if people have questions on anything.
Okay.
Um,
Yes, Dr. Conti.
Any staffing changes or additions or nothing?
I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
I had one other question, but that's okay. Go ahead.
No,
If you have a
I
question?
was wondering what we were waiting for.
No, I
Okay.
was just thinking, I'm sorry, I was thinking of a question, because I had a question written down.
Okay.
Curricular adoptions, any,
I think there may be one area, but I'd rather leave that for, when that school comes, just to
okay,
go
that'd be
do
in
it that
school,
way, yeah.
But you're
Yes,
involved in that
yes,
conversation?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Murphy?
Just kind of a general comment, I think, especially for somebody who might be watching this at home. What we're talking about here are, and we'll be talking about going forward, different departments and ultimately different schools as well coming in with their requests. One of our jobs is to come up with a final budget which may or may not include all of the requests that we're hearing about today. So I just, somebody who flicked on the TV and heard this, like, the first 4 reports included 4 or 5 new potential employees.
Right.
That certainly doesn't mean that that's what's going to be the end result is, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I just wanted to make the point that these are requests from department heads and principals and as part of our coming up with a final budget. So
Thank
just
you.
because we're hearing it, that doesn't mean we're necessarily getting it
Right.
at this stage of the game anyway.
Mr. Eiler, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Just a few items on this one. Want to understand, what's the translations at 35,000?
So one of the things we have to do, again, to meet legal requirements is make sure that documents are available to families in their home language. So there may be something, a new parent may come in who speaks a different language. We may not have a translation. We have to, on the spot, push it out to a company that will get us the document translated so we can provide it for that family so it's accessible.
What sort of things are required to be translated?
If a family tells us they need everything translated, then that's our, anything that goes home, that would go home to other families they need in their native language, then that's something we have to provide legally.
Okay, so it's not curriculum translation, it's translation for notices to families?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Ive, a family has to come in for a meeting, and
Yep.
there's documentation that we have to provide. If the family requests that, we have to also have a translator available to verbally translate for the family, but we would also need to provide any written documents in that language as well. One of our challenges is there are many districts that have a higher percentage of families who don't speak English, but if those families, many of them tend to be in the same language. So if you have a high number of Hispanic or Portuguese-speaking families, translating is relatively easy. Our blessing is that we have over 50 languages spoken at our high school, so we have many languages where translations aren't readily available. The state is providing more translated documents as part of their regular service, but they tend not to do that in the languages that we need. Luganda is a language. We have a high number of families from Uganda. It's not a language that the Department of Education would in a standard way provide as a translation. So that, again, as an example, our challenge is maybe not based on the percentage of overall students, but the number of languages that we have.
Absolutely.
And the services are expensive.
Okay. And what is iReady at 70,000?
iReady is something we've been using for a long time, and it's an assessment tool where we measure the progress of students at different times in the year. So it's a standardized test.
It's a standardized test.
Yeah.
And is this
Assessment, yeah.
is this assessing something other than
Math
like
and math and reading is what we use it for.
How does that compare to MCAS or?
Again, our whole, go ahead, you're an expert
I
on
know,
it.
I opened a can of worms on that, but I had to ask.
iReady is our universal screening tool at the elementary level. We give it 3 times a year, fall, winter, end of year. It's normed on those 3 times of the year. It provides us useful data, so it's real-time data that we get. MCAS is a state assessment. It's virtually useless for us instructionally because we test the kids sometime in the spring and we don't get the results until the next fall. So MCAS is an obligation. I would say it's a test. iReady is an assessment that allows us to shape instruction and to target individual needs. So if there's a student that is struggling in phonics, then we can address a phonics deficit. If it tends to be fluency or some other deficit, we can target that. So these are tools that allow us to target student needs, highlight some strengths, and then move forward.
Right,
And
so
sorry, just to clarify, we use it for reading. We use Symphony for math at the elementary level, and you'll see iReady adding middle school. It said on there, and Ms. Purchase had experience with iReady from her previous district, so she's added it as well as a middle school tool.
Okay, so it's letting us make real-time adjustments on instruction. All right, and then
And if I could add also for you and other people that we do talk sometimes about our response to intervention programs that we have at the elementary, and now I think it's extending into the middle school. Sometimes it's called multi-tiered instruction. And these are the kind of screening assessments that allow us to help a child get the additional tier 2 instruction that they might need in fractions, but when they are doing fine in decimals, I'm probably using a little high of a level example because I've been working in middle school lately, but they can be, provided the additional instruction, the additional tier of instruction based on what they need in that unit. And if they don't need it, then they might be in level 1, and if they do need it, they might be in level 2, and if they're still not getting it, they might get level 3 for a while, and then when they go to a new concept or a new unit, as Dr. Conti was saying for the reading, if it's fluency or if it's phonics, kids have strengths and weaknesses in many different areas, as we all do. So it's the tool that allows us to provide instruction at multi-tiered levels.
Sure.
And in real time, as we were saying.
Okay, and this is more my understanding, I think. For the 504 needs, I'm just curious it's only 7K here, but I'm just curious why it's here versus in the sped budget.
Well, again, legally, we should not have 504 and special ed coupled together. Once somebody's not, they're two different avenues, so 504 comes out of my office, I oversee that, and special education accommodations come from the special ed coordinator's office. So.
Okay, fair enough.
So a 504 accommodation
I
is not a
understand
special
more-
education service.
I understand that, but oftentimes they're coupled, but I understand not always.
I think, again, traditionally, back, I don't know, 10 years ago, they were always, I think, coupled together, but I think as we've gotten better at this, it's clear why they need to be separated, so. And a lot, 504s could also be sometimes for a medical need, not just a disability, so.
Okay, great, thanks.
They're two separate federal
Yeah.
laws,
Okay. Any further questions on curriculum, comments? Good. So we have made it through those topics on the agenda. And now if there is someone here for public participation.
Madam Chair, again,
no,
just
we
before
got
we leave
more
the budget, I
things.
just want to
Yes, budget.
summarize tonight's
Yes, thank
events.
you.
I want to thank everyone who presented. They really worked hard to come in at 0%. As Mr. Murphy said, we're not limiting any of the requests that are coming in, so you're seeing stuff directly from people in terms of what they need. So all of I would say the operational aspects, they really tried to hold to 0. We do have some additional position requests that resulted from tonight that I just want to summarize. So we have 2 nurses, we have 1 computer technician, and 1 maintenance position. So
Okay.
those were the positions that were requested as a result of tonight's budgets.
Right. And again, to repeat what Mr. Murphy said for people who may be watching, we're going to take all of the requests, but we are not likely to be able to fund all of them or to provide all of them. So we will hear in the next several months. We do have a budget calendar that you can find. Is that available yet on the website, Mr. Larkin?
It'll be up by the end of the week.
By the end of the week. And just to say, at our next meeting, we'll be talking about the different parts of the budget at different meetings. Our next meeting has been changed, is not on a Tuesday, it's on Monday, March 2nd. And that is an additional meeting we're having, but it's on Monday because of primary election day. So that will be held March 2nd. We'll be covering the high school budget, guidance, athletics, art, music, phys ed and health, science center, and the student information office. And then on March 10th, we will have the elementary schools presenting. On the 24th, we'll have the middle school as well as special education, the early childhood center, and the capital warrant articles. And on March 27th, we have a deadline of making decisions for. So those are the upcoming meetings, and the topics we'll be covering in the budget section of the meeting. Are there any other comments on the agenda tonight or questions on the budget? Is there anyone here for public participation at this point? Okay, so at this point, I believe we do have a need for executive session tonight. Is that true, Dr. Conti? Okay.
Briefly.
So we have need for executive section, General Law 30, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I do. Regarding our clerical employees, BSAA, and instructional assistants. And if, there's my list, hold on, here's my words. And we do have to discuss these matters in executive session because to discuss them publicly would jeopardize the position of the body. We will reconvene only to adjourn the public session. So the meeting, do we take a motion?
I'll move, Madam Chair, that we go into executive session.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Russo,
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. We are now in executive session.